Hey, what's up, folks? Welcome back to On Texas Football. I'm lifetime Longhorn Rod Babers. Pleased to be joined by the young prodigy, lifetime Longhorn CJ Vogel, and we are here for your game week preview. Yes, officially done with the regular season. Moving on to the postseason, the Longhorns will be taking on the Georgia Bulldogs, a chance to avenge their only loss on the season in the SEC title game against Georgia in Atlanta. So basically in Georgia territory, if you will. CJ, a lot to get into, of course. We'll get into breaking down the matchup here. But first of all, your opening thoughts. People say it's tough to beat a good team twice. I know you were feeling real good, as we all were, about Texas' chances in that first matchup. We all got a little slapped around by reality that Kirby Smart is the best coach in college football for a reason, and that they are Georgia, the standard of college football right now for a reason. But how do you feel about the chances for the Longhorns to pull off the win their second time around?
Yeah, I felt really good. The first time that these teams played, look, I do think this is a very beatable Georgia team. Obviously, they've lost twice this year. They went to 8 overtimes with Georgia Tech. I think that this isn't as dominant a Georgia team as we've seen in years past. I said that the first go round. I got slapped around and got a taste of humble pie. This time, I still feel like they're a beatable football team. However, I think they match up very well with Texas, obviously. Having watched some of the weeks after that Georgia-Texas game, their strengths still match up with Texas's weakness, and Texas's weaknesses still kind of match up with Georgia's strengths. So it'll be interesting, of course, going against the Steve Sarkisian offense two times in the same season. I'm sure there'll be extra wrinkles, but at the same time, Kirby Smart and his team absolutely can expect to see some sort of wrinkles or little tricks, tidbits, whatever you want to call it, that weren't necessarily in the playbook the first time around. I don't feel as confident, even with Texas kind of playing its best football right now and Georgia still kind of sputtering around.
Yep.
I can't say with complete certainty, Rod, that I'm over the moon with confidence at the moment.
Yeah, the only thing, and we'll start with it, that gives me almost too much confidence going into this game against a team in a team in a program like Georgia is that Texas defense. So I figure that's where we'll start. We'll start the Texas D versus the Georgia offense, and then we'll make our way to what I think you're essentially talking about, the matchup advantage for Georgia. It seems like they're just a good matchup defensively for that Texas offense, and we'll talk about why that is the case as well. But first, let's thank our sponsor for our game week preview this week, and it is Mark Saunders. We really appreciate him and his support when it comes to protecting all of your stuff. Wouldn't it be great to have one place that protects it all? Well, here's some great news for you folks. Texas Allstate agent Mark Saunders is the only insurance agent that you need. Everything from your home, car, and boat to your motorcycle, RV, ATV, no matter what it is. So if you're looking for someone local, Austin, Round Rock area, give Mark a call at 512-218-8571. Are you in good hands? With more than 35 years of experience, you will be with Texas alum Mark Saunders. Call Texas Allstate agent Mark Saunders. Give him a call today at 512-218-8571. Thank you very much to Mark Saunders for sponsoring our game week preview and being a part of the On Texas Football family. All right, let's start with that Georgia offense. One thing that concerns me, because when Texas played Georgia initially, Carson Beck was in the midst of his worst string of games that we've probably seen him play in his career. He was at a low point. There's no doubt about it. Multiple intercept had basically had 3 straight games with multiple interceptions in those games. Actually it was 4 out of 5 games in a stretch where he had multiple interceptions in a game. He has since calmed down the last 3 games. He's actually now playing his best football of the season. Last 3 games, over 62% completion percentage. Each of those games threw for 347, 297, and 297 in those games. 11 total touchdowns in those 3 games. 0 interceptions combined in the last 3 games. Carson Beck is now starting to look like the Carson Beck that was getting a lot of first-round love before the season started. He has calmed down a little bit. That is, to me, a little unsettling because when Texas played the first time, he was a turnover machine, and that came to fruition, with all the interceptions he threw the first time around against Texas. This time, not sure if you're going to get the erratic Carson Beck that Texas got the first time around.
Yeah, you probably won't. And to your point, he's just playing his best football right now. But let's go through it real quick. Those last 3 games were Tennessee at home, UMass, and 8 overtimes against Georgia Tech. So, yes, he is playing his best football, but aside from Tennessee, where he threw 2 touchdowns and had, 340 yards on 25 of 40 passing, it's a good day. That's a good day. I'm not discrediting that. But UMass and Georgia Tech, the 2 other teams right there that he had really racked up some solid statistics with. Of course, those overtime stats probably boosted just quite a bit going into 8 overtimes. He had 5 touchdowns in that game. But, yes, this is the best style of football he's been playing. And I'm looking back at whenever he was going through the rut of interceptions. He was playing Texas, Florida, Mississippi State, Alabama. There was 12 interceptions over the span of 5 games there for Carson Beck. It's not great. It's not great at all. And when you're facing tough defenses like Texas is, and they had great success in that first game of mixing up looks, making plays on the football, reading his eyes, making sure that wherever he threw the football, there was a defender in range. Against Texas, he threw for 175 yards, no touchdowns, and 3 interceptions in that first game. He was 23 of 41. It's not great. It's not bad. It's 56, 57% right in that range. 4 explosive plays, Rod. So 4 plays went for more than 15 yards. Wow. Those 4 plays combined accumulated for 102 yards. What does that tell me? He went 19 of 37 for 73 yards on his other passes. Texas held him in check the entire day, aside from really 1 third and 12 completion and then the flea flicker right after.
That's a good point. No, it's good. Yeah, this Texas defense, it is the best pass defense in the country. So he may be playing his best football, but he's going up against the toughest test. And the last time he went up against this type of defense, he failed it miserably. And it was just kind of a defensive slugfest. One other thing that I'm watching in this contest that may be a little different than the first matchup, these are the Texas defense versus this Georgia offense. Trevor Etienne. We're not sure about his status. Most people believe that he's not going to play. Last injury report was that, he was questionable, but there are reports that believe that he's out, that he's not going to be available for them. We shall see. They have they got basically a freshman, Nate Frazier, I believe is his name, correct? Yeah. That will be in it. They also have a young man, Roderick Robinson. They threw out there as well. The Texas rush defense is playing some of their best football right now. I went and looked at the stats the last 3 weeks for the Texas rush defense. They're 6th in rushing yards per game in the last 3 weeks, and 2nd in yards per rush allowed in the last 3 weeks. So that rush defense, which was at the time they played Georgia, that was probably your biggest flaw. It was leaky. It was still a good rush defense, but it was leaky, and they exposed that leakage. That rush defense is not as leaky as it once was when Texas played Georgia the first time. I think that's going to play a huge role in this game too. They are less formidable with their run game without Trevor Etienne, or possibly with a hurt Trevor Etienne, and Texas rush defense right now playing their best football. We even saw it on display versus the Aggies on the road. Yeah,
100%. And I look back at that A&M rushing attack. Texas didn't allow a single rush over 5 yards to the running backs. And they held Marcel Reed in check. Obviously, Carson Beck not as much as a rushing threat as Reed was, but to the point, this Texas rush defense up front, Vernon Broughton, Alfred Collins, they're playing their best football over the last 3 weeks or so, and that was certainly highlighted last week in College Station. The other thing I wanted to point out with Nate Frazier is when you compare him with Trevor Etienne, he is I would say not remotely close to the threat out of the backfield as Etienne is. Of course, right now Nate Frazier on the season has 9 receptions for 59 yards. He's been targeted 12 times. 3 of those incompletions have been drops, whereas Trevor Etienne on the season has 23 of his 24 targets hauled in for receptions. You see they like to go to him quite a bit in the passing game. Right now, Nate Frazier not necessarily used as a big-time receiving back. But, hey, Rod, there's tendency breakers, and you're going to have to pull them out. That might be one where you see them go to the quick screens, go to the Texas routes, go to something that targets the running backs out of the backfield versus what we've seen in the past and especially have expected with Etienne versus Frazier.
Yeah, no, it's a good point about that. So I'm not saying the young man Nate Frazier can't handle the load, but of course, a guy like Trevor Etienne, there were plays that he made in that game against Texas the first time around. He made some guys just miss. There was some NFL runs that he had in that first matchup. So I think that could play a huge role for Texas as well. All right, jumping to the other side of the ball here, because I do think that for Texas, the biggest leaps, all right, of improvement need to be made in this matchup, the Texas offense versus that Georgia defense. Those where you're going to see the biggest adjustments made by Texas. And I wonder how much of the Georgia game plan will change because it was so successful. I do. That's why sometimes it's tough to beat a team twice. I will. How much of that Georgia game plan will change if you're Kirby Smart, considering how you overwhelmed Texas in that first matchup. CJ, do you change much? Do you change much, or do you have your change up ready?
Yeah,
have the change up ready. But I think I might go out there and just say, you know what, guys, we whipped them pretty much. Basically with our first game plan. Let's throw it out there. If they have some adjustments for it, okay, then we'll have the counter and the change up ready to go. But why change it up if it ain't broke, don't fix it?
That's kind of where I'm sitting. I mean, look, how much really needs to change when you can put a Mikael Williams out on the edge. You can blitz a Jalen Walker and say, hey, just go get him. And they accounted for 7 sacks between the two, right? I mean, they had a heck of a day. Just going through the numbers once again, I know Texas fans, this might make your ears bleed a little bit. 10 tackles for loss for negative 63 yards, 7 sacks, 3 strip sacks, and an interception. That's a pretty darn good day for a defense, regardless of who you're playing, right? Yeah, Rod, they could be playing me and all my friends, and you come away with those numbers. You're looking pretty good. But at the end of the day, Texas has to protect the quarterback better. Texas has to run the football better. Only 28 yards of rushing offense on the evening in October against Georgia the first time around. And they got to protect the rock, right? Protect the quarterback, run the rock, and protect the rock. That's the biggest issue for me. Just going through the scoring drives for Georgia in that game, this was the biggest issue for me. They had a touchdown drives of 13 yards, 34 yards, and then 89 yards. That was the long kind of game-sealing touchdown late in the third, early fourth quarter there. They had field goal drives of 13 yards, 34 yards, 4 yards, and 25 yards. They didn't have to go more than 35 yards on a scoring drive more than once. You cannot win football games if that's the case.
Wow. It's unbelievable. Yeah, I mean, I still can't believe when you say it, it's mind-blowing that the Texas defense played that well. But if you're just looking at the score, you'd think, oh, man, Georgia ran it up and down the field on that Texas defense. No, that was a defensive slugfest. That was a heavyweight defensive fight. We might see it again. Good stuff there, CJ. I almost forgot about that, too. That's why I think in this matchup, to me, it's all about the offensive line for Texas. I think that's kind of the offensive line in the run game, and Trey Weiss was a part of that. I mean, Trey Weissner, he's on a heater. He's had career games in back-to-back games, right? 344 yards rushing, nearly 6 yards per carry in the last 2 games. And on the road versus A&M, I mean, he was a man amongst boys, Mr. Weisner, if you want to call him that. And that Texas offensive line, they were, let's be honest, they were embarrassed in that first matchup, right? When you're talking about run blocking, you're talking about pass blocking, they were embarrassed. This is a Joe Moore award-winning finalist, offensive line, right? They're finalists for the Joe Moore Award, so they're one of the best O-lines in the country. I think you're going to get a bounce back performance from that group. There's no way a team like that, with a group like that with that much pride, isn't going to have a bounce back performance. Not saying they're going to dominate Georgia or anything, but I don't expect them to be the liability they were in that game. And this is the question: will that run game travel? If that Texas run game travels like it has the last couple of weeks, and like it did versus the Aggies, the Longhorns, I think, are in a really good position to win this game. And they'll stay out of those predictable passing situations where Kirby Smart was able to throw the exotic, elaborate, pre-snap disguise looks at Quinn and some of the elaborate pressure packages. They won't be able to deploy those if Texas can stay out of third and long situations, predictable passing situations. And that's something to look at, too, because Georgia's rush defense, CJ, the last 3 weeks, it has played its worst football. So the Texas running game is hitting a peak. And for some reason, the Georgia rush defense now, they're looking like a little battered and bruised. They gave up 2, obviously Georgia Tech. That's 8 overtime, so that's considered. And they are a running football team with a quarterback that can run it. 260. UMass ran for 226. Tennessee ran for 146. The last 3 weeks, as a matter of fact, I went and looked at it. If you go look at rushing yards per rush allowed, they're at 5.1 yards per rush allowed in the last 3 weeks. Texas running the ball as well as anybody, right now they're kind of a top 20 rushing team and top 25 rushing team in the country the last 2 or 3 weeks. I would say that Texas is in a really good position. If you can't run the ball against this Georgia defense right now, then what we've said about the matchup then is indeed true. They're just a bad matchup for you, run game and everything.
That's kind of it. Of course, going back to that Texas-Georgia game previously, Texas had 29 rush attempts for 27 yards. So right about a yard per carry. That's not great. Obviously, Texas went down early, didn't necessarily abandon the run, but couldn't rely on it the way that they've liked to, especially in the second half of football games. But this will be a really interesting game to see, where does Arch Manning come into play here? And again, I do think Quinn's going to be healthy. I do think Quinn's going to be the starter for this game. But look, he was healthy enough to go for the full game against Texas A&M, and that still brought in the Arch Manning package where we saw 3 snaps, we saw 3 quarterback runs, whether it be designs, whether it be a read option. We watched Haynes King really kind of thrash that Georgia offense with his legs and with the threat of a read option, a triple option, whether it be an RPO, whether it just be a straight drop back. Look, he was effective in scrambling, pulling the ball and taking the ball to go. That'll be really interesting to see if there's an extension of what we saw of Arch Manning versus Texas A&M against Georgia, because it does feel like there are some weaknesses to exploit with that Georgia defense. The one other game I wanted to mention is when Georgia went to Tennessee, when Tennessee went to Georgia, they got up to a 10-0 lead. They ran the ball well. That Nico was making good plays, and then the game kind of flipped. They ended up losing 30-17 to Georgia. Dylan Sampson, the all-world running back out of Tennessee, I believe he's up to about 23 touchdowns on the year or something silly like that. He ran for 101 yards on 18 attempts. It's a solid day.
Yeah.
Collectively, the Tennessee rushing attack finished around 3.7 yards per attempt. That's not as great, right? Obviously, it's not 1.1, but if Texas can finish north of that 4.0, 4.1, 4.2 mark, then you're sitting in a really comfortable spot to play that complementary fashion football that Texas wants to play with its running game and its passing game and its screen game. Because the minute you see play action, quarterback keeps the ball, you see linebackers just bolting out of there, which opens up for Gunnar Helm or Trey Wisner or Jaden Blue in the screen game. So you got to be efficient in the run game, and I think that's the big key for me offensively here amongst, protecting the quarterback.
That's a great point, because CJ, the way I see this, I don't know if you're going to be able to run it down to down and get like you did against A&M and get 5, 6, 7 yards pop. I don't know if that's going to happen, but can you just pop a few? You just want to pop a few. All right, that's exactly. Pop a few to keep it respectable, because against Georgia Tech, there were, I believe Kirby Smart said 16. They held them to 16 second and longs, like basically 2nd and 7 or more yards to gain. That means they won, won, or at least it was a push on first down. Right? To hold somebody to 3 yards of first down, that's considered a win for the defense. You can keep them in 2nd long and 3rd long, and yet they couldn't win on the 3rd and long. At least Georgia couldn't. I believe Georgia Tech was like 4 of 6 on 3rd and long situations in that game. But anyway, my point is, if they win on first down, you can still, if you're Texas, you don't necessarily have to always go straight to the pass on 2nd down and 7 if you can pop a few every now and then. And I think Texas can. I mean, Texas, basically, it'll come down to this in the run game. We won't get deep into it, but can Texas win the wide zone? That's been their moneymaker. The last 2 games, damn near 70% of their explosive runs essentially have come on the wide zone or split wide zone. Yeah. Basically, they split the wide zone and the counter. Can you run those against Georgia? Because if you can't run those against Georgia, then the run game may stall, because that's been their really explosive run game concepts the last couple of weeks, and they've really hit their stride. So that's also something to watch. When I was going back and looking at the second half and some things that Sark may have dialed in the second half that started to work, where they moved the offense a little bit. First of all, you're right about the Arch Manning package. I mean, their most explosive run in the first half was Arch Manning. I believe Arch was, if I'm not mistaken, when he ran that 21-yarder, I believe they might have been an empty formation. And that 21-yarder that he ran. So that's something to watch. Number one is Penn Texas targets to motion, because in that second half, their touchdowns are target to motion. That one to Isaiah Bond. Right. They had a 24-yarder that was a target to motion to Matthew Golden. So sometimes the rules of a defense, they have certain rules specifically for guys who go in motion. And then if you can kind of figure out what those rules are, then targeting guys in motion can really work well for you against certain types of defenses. Maybe that works in the Georgia defense. We talked about that in the first matchup. And in Texas, I know empty is not something they do a lot of, but their 2-point conversion, I believe, came in empty formation in that game. That 2-point conversion they had came out of empty formation, and it worked for Alabama against Georgia really, really well. It worked really well for Alabama. And now they got a running threat at quarterback, so it makes it a little different. But those are a couple of things that I start adjust to in the second half that may pay some dividends in this game. You may see it early on. We'll see. All right. Any other closing remarks about this matchup in terms of tendency breakers? Because that's what Kirby Smart did in the first matchup that was so brilliant. He actually did break tendency. According to Pro Football Focus, the blitz rate for a Kirby Smart defense is usually pretty high. He's hovering around 50%. In that game versus Texas, he was around 30%. He was a little over 30%. Not as much blitzing, but a lot of disguise and a lot of simulated pressures and a lot of different exotic pressure packages. Not necessarily blitzes, but pressure packages. Right. And if you go look at the amount of disguise he threw out there, usually they disguise their coverages around 25% of the time. Georgia does. In that game for Texas, it was close to 40% of their coverages were disguised coverages. Now you can negate all that by just running the football effectively. But when you don't run the football effectively, I wonder if they'll go with the same strategy, lower blitz rates but higher rates of disguise, or if you'll see them flip it. Because Quinn has not necessarily handled blitz as well. So why not? Let's ramp it up. Let's blitz the hell out of them. Yeah. The hell with disguise. Let's just blitz them and get home. I never know. I don't know how you beat a team twice and what the strategy is, but I know you want to flip it and change some strategy. That may be a tendency breaker as well.
Yeah, I agree. I still think I would blitz Quinn quite a bit. Of course, on a hobbled ankle, I would make sure that he's under pressure. I think the first meeting, they attacked the right side of the offensive line with DJ Campbell and Cam Williams. I think there's going to be an emphasis to get them some help, which means, do you go after a hobbled Kelvin Banks? I think so. Do you go after a young Trevor Gooseby? I think so. So that's what I would do if I was Georgia. I would make sure that my pressure packages are fighting off the left side, the blind side for Quinn Ewers, because, again, he doesn't sense pressure very well and doesn't evade pressure very well. You got a hobbled left tackle or a very young left tackle. Seems like a place that's vulnerable to allow pressures, and that doesn't bode well for Texas in this game.
Yep. Good point there, CJ. All right. Good stuff as always. Thank you very much to our sponsor, Mark Saunders. Really appreciate him. You see the number right there on your screen. Thank you very much to Mark Saunders when it comes to protecting all your stuff. Wouldn't it be great to have one place that protects it all? Here's some great news. Texas All-State agent Mark Saunders, you see him right there on your screen, is the only insurance agent you need. Everything from your home, car, boat, motorcycle, RV, ATV. If you're looking for someone local to the Austin, Round Rock area, give Mark a call today, 512-218-8571. Are you in good hands? With more than 35 years of experience, you will be with Texas alum Mark Saunders. Call Texas agent Mark Saunders' office today at 512-218-8571. All right, CJ, thank you for all the knowledge and all the hard work. Hopefully, next game preview, we're talking about a Longhorn win over the Georgia Bulldogs, or the SEC champion Texas Longhorns in the college football playoff. So thanks, CJ. Thank you to Mark Saunders as well. Thank you to all of you guys out there for watching and listening. And until next time, hook 'em horns.
Hook 'em. Thank you, Rod. Let's get it ring.